It was supposed to be the most perfect moment of her life. A spring afternoon, sunlight flooding through tall church windows, the smell of fresh flowers, the sound of piano music drifting through the hall. She wore a white gown that had taken months to perfect, and her fiancé waited at the altar with trembling hands. The guests were seated. The cameras were rolling. Everything was exactly as she had dreamed it would be. But in the next few minutes, this wedding would become something no one in that church could have predicted. Because sometimes fate doesn't work the way we plan. Sometimes it works the way it needs to. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Here's what people didn't know that morning. There was a woman in that church whose entire life was about to change in a single moment. There was a mother who didn't even realize her daughter was walking down the aisle, and there was a secret hidden inside something so small, so ordinary, that it almost went unnoticed. A birthmark on a wrist. One small detail. That's all it took. So the question isn't just whether the couple would make it to the altar, it's whether anyone could have stopped what was about to happen. And more importantly, should they have? Because some reunions, no matter how impossible they seem, are exactly what were meant to be. Let's go back 20 years. A city in America, much like any other, with busy streets and ordinary lives unfolding behind closed doors. A woman named Rachel made the kind of decision that would haunt her forever. She held a newborn baby girl in her arms, her daughter, her own flesh and blood, and she made a choice that broke her heart into pieces. Circumstances beyond her control, a life that wasn't ready, a world that wasn't kind to unmarried mothers with no resources. She did what she thought she had to do. She let her go. Agencies, paperwork, tears in the dark, a goodbye she never said out loud. Rachel would spend the next 2 decades trying to build a different life. She married a good man named Tom. They tried for children, but it never happened the way they hoped, and so they opened their hearts to adoption. They wanted to be parents. They wanted to give a child a home. Tom and Rachel adopted a son, Michael, when he was 3 years old. He became their world. But somewhere in Rachel's mind, in the quiet moments late at night, she never stopped thinking about the daughter she gave away. She never stopped wondering what had become of her. Meanwhile, across the country, a young woman named Claire was growing up. Her adoptive parents found her as a baby on the roadside, abandoned in a cardboard box with nothing but a blanket and a note that simply said, "Please take care of her." They named her Claire, raised her as their own, and loved her completely. They never told her she was adopted. It was a secret they kept for 20 years, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. They wanted her to feel secure, to belong, to never feel like an outsider in her own family. Claire grew up beautiful and kind, artistic and thoughtful. She learned to sew from her mother. She helped her father in his small business, and she fell in love with a wonderful man named Michael. Michael, the adopted son of Rachel and Tom, was quiet and steady. He was the kind of man who showed up, to Sunday dinners, to his best friend's struggles, to every moment that mattered. When he met Claire at a community volunteer event, something clicked. They had that instant recognition, the feeling of coming home. After 3 years of dating, Michael asked her to marry him. She said yes. And the wedding was planned for spring, at the church where they had met the pastor who would change everything. The morning of the wedding arrived like a normal day, except nothing about it was normal. Rachel woke up before sunrise, her stomach tight with emotion. She was about to watch her son get married. She was going to meet his wife's family. She had bought a new dress. She had practiced what to say. And she had, without knowing why, printed out a photo from an adoption agency, a photo of the baby girl she gave away so many years ago. It sat in her nightstand drawer. She didn't know why she kept looking at it. She didn't know why, after all these years, she felt like something was calling her. At the church, Claire was in the bridal room with her mother and her bridesmaids. She was nervous, excited, terrified, the normal emotions of a bride. Her mother kept smoothing down her hair, adjusting her veil, telling her how beautiful she looked. Claire's hands were shaking slightly. She kept thinking about Michael, about the life they were about to build together. And then, just as they were about to go downstairs, Claire's mother pulled her aside and sat her down. Her voice was quiet. She said, "Sweetheart, there's something we need to tell you before you walk down that aisle." That was when Claire learned the truth. She learned that she was adopted, that she had been found as a baby and brought into a family that loved her unconditionally. For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. 22 years of believing one truth, and then suddenly the ground shifted. Her mother held her hand and said, "We were always going to tell you. We just wanted to find the right moment. And now, right before you marry this man, we want you to know that he's not your brother. He's the man you love. He's the man who loves you. And that's what matters." Claire cried, but she also smiled. Her parents were right. Nothing had changed about how she felt about Michael. The wedding was going to happen. Downstairs in the main church hall, guests were still arriving. Rachel sat in the front row with Tom and Michael. She was dressed in an elegant blue dress, and she couldn't stop fidgeting with her hands. Tom kept squeezing her hand, telling her to relax. Michael stood at the altar, looking more handsome than Rachel had ever seen him, his eyes fixed on the back doors where Claire would soon appear. And then the music started. The wedding march filled the church. Everyone stood up, heads turned, and that was when Rachel's world stopped. Claire walked down the aisle in a simple white gown, her eyes on Michael, a gentle smile on her face. As she reached the altar, as she took Michael's hand and turned slightly to face the priest, her wrist caught the light. And there it was, a birthmark, a small, distinctive spot on her right wrist, a shape that Rachel knew as well as she knew her own face, because she had been born with it herself, because Rachel had held that wrist for 3 days before she gave her away. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Her hands went cold. She looked at Tom. He didn't see it. He was watching the ceremony, smiling proudly at his son. But Rachel couldn't look away from that birthmark. The priest began speaking. The ceremony proceeded. But Rachel's mind was racing. It couldn't be. The odds were impossible. And yet, she had spent 20 years looking at photographs of babies from the adoption agency where she gave her daughter away. She had wondered about every young woman she passed on the street. And now, here, at her son's wedding, was someone with her birthmark. Someone with her eyes. Someone with a face that suddenly looked so familiar, she didn't know how she had missed it all this time. After the vows, after the kiss, as the newlyweds walked back down the aisle together, Rachel made a decision. She had to know. The reception was being held in the church basement. Tables were set with white tablecloths, flowers decorated every corner, soft music played in the background. Guests were mingling, laughing, taking photographs. The bride and groom were doing their formal photos with the photographer. Rachel found Claire's parents standing by the gift table, looking proud and happy. She approached them slowly, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She introduced herself as Michael's mother. She told them how beautiful their daughter looked. She made small talk for a few minutes. And then, in a quiet voice, she asked a question that changed everything. "I noticed something about your daughter. She has a very distinctive birthmark on her wrist. I was just wondering, was she by any chance adopted?" The words hung in the air. Claire's mother looked shocked. Claire's father looked confused. They exchanged a glance, and then Claire's mother said, "How did you know that? We never told anyone. That's been a secret for 20 years. Rachel's knees felt weak. "Can you tell me where she was adopted from? What agency?" Claire's mother provided the name and the approximate year. Rachel heard the words, and suddenly she was in her own past, remembering the paperwork, remembering the name of the agency, remembering the date. She excused herself and went to the bathroom. She called Tom on his cell phone. "Tom, I need you to look in my nightstand. There's a photo there, a baby photo from the adoption agency. Can you describe what you see?" Tom was confused, but he went and found it. He described a baby girl with dark hair and a small birthmark on her wrist. Rachel hung up the phone. She was shaking. She went back and found Claire. She asked the bride if she could speak with her privately for just a moment. The two of them stepped outside into the spring afternoon. The sun was warm, and the church parking lot was quiet. Rachel's voice was trembling. She said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to listen carefully. 20 years ago, did your parents tell you that you were found as a baby?" Claire felt afraid. She didn't know this woman. How did she know these things? But something in Rachel's eyes was kind, was desperate, was loving. Claire said, "They told me today, this morning, right before I walked down the aisle." Rachel took a breath. I think I'm your mother. I think I gave birth to you. I think 20 years ago, I had to make a choice I have regretted every single day since." Claire didn't move. She didn't speak. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Rachel kept talking, her own voice breaking. "You have my birthmark. You have my eyes. You have my heart, and I didn't even know it until today." And then Claire was crying too, and Rachel was holding her, and they were both crying, and there was nothing anyone could do but let it happen. Minutes later, Rachel and Claire walked back into the reception together. Michael saw them first, and his face changed. He could feel that something had shifted, that something monumental had happened. Rachel took his hand and led him and his wife to a quiet corner. She told Michael the truth. She told him that Claire was her biological daughter, that she had given her up when she was a newborn, that she had never stopped thinking about her. Michael listened, and tears started forming in his eyes. He looked at Claire. He said, "I love you. This doesn't change anything. You're my wife. You're the woman I chose. And now you're also the woman my mother has been searching for her whole life." The news spread quietly through the reception. Some guests heard it and didn't quite believe it. Some heard it and were moved to tears. Some didn't hear it at all and just enjoyed the party. But for Rachel, for Claire, for Tom, for Michael, and for Claire's adoptive parents, the evening had transformed into something far more significant than a traditional wedding celebration. It became a family reunion. It became a story of loss and found, of heartbreak and healing, of the strange mathematics of fate that sometimes works in ways we cannot explain. Later, as people were dancing and celebrating, Claire's adoptive mother pulled Rachel aside. She said, "I want you to know something. We have loved your daughter every single day of her life. We gave her everything we could, and we are so grateful that today she gets to meet you too, because she deserves to know where she came from. She deserves to have you in her life." Rachel hugged her. This woman who had raised her daughter, this woman who had been the mother Claire needed when Rachel couldn't be. And for the first time in 20 years, Rachel felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, because there was nothing to forgive. More like completion, like a circle being closed. The evening ended like all weddings end, with cake and dances and goodbyes. But as Michael and Claire left for their honeymoon, Claire held Rachel's hand. She said, "Thank you for not giving up looking. Thank you for the strength to ask that question today. I spent my whole life wondering where I came from, and today I found out I come from you, and that's a gift I can never repay." Rachel kissed her forehead and said, "You already have. You gave me the chance to be your mother, even if it took 20 years, and even if it happens a little differently than I planned. You gave me that chance." So here's what this wedding taught us. It taught us that family isn't always about biology, but sometimes it is about recognition. It taught us that the people who raise us and love us are our true parents. But that doesn't mean there's no room for the people who gave us life. It taught us that the smallest details, a birthmark, a moment of noticing, a question asked in the right moment, can change everything. And it taught us that love, real love, is big enough to expand and grow and hold room for people we never expected. Think about that for a moment. Rachel spent 20 years not knowing where her daughter was or what had become of her. She thought she might never know. She thought she would carry that loss forever. But a mother's love is patient. It waits. It remembers. And sometimes when you least expect it, it finds its way home. How many of us are carrying losses we think are permanent? How many of us have given up on finding people we thought were lost? This story says that sometimes, if we stay open, if we keep looking, if we ask the right questions, we might get our answer. This is also a story about the courage it takes to ask difficult questions. Rachel could have just looked at that birthmark and thought, "No, that's too much of a coincidence. That could never be true." But she asked anyway. She risked looking foolish. She risked being wrong. She risked having her heart broken all over again. But she asked, and her question changed a life. It changed multiple lives. As you watch this story, we want to ask you something. What would you have done in Rachel's position? Would you have had the courage to ask that question? Or would you have let that moment pass, thinking it was too impossible to be real? And if you were Claire, how would you have felt learning that your biological mother was waiting at your wedding all along, that she had been searching for you? Could you forgive 20 years of separation if it meant finding each other at last? Would it feel like a curse or a blessing, or somehow both? This is the thing about family secrets. They have a way of coming out. And sometimes when they do, they don't destroy things. Sometimes they heal them. Sometimes they complete them. And sometimes they remind us that the world is far more interconnected, far more mysterious, and far more full of purpose than we ever realized. On what was supposed to be just a wedding day, Claire found out who she really was. Rachel found her daughter. And Michael found that his mother had a depth of love and longing he never fully understood until that afternoon. Before we end, we want to hear from you. Do you believe in fate? Do you think Rachel and Claire were meant to find each other on that day? Or do you think it was purely coincidence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family, about the people you've lost or the people you've found, please share it with someone. Because sometimes we all need to be reminded that love doesn't give up. That connection, real connection, finds a way. That even in our darkest moments of loss, hope is still possible. And if you're still watching, thank you. Thank you for staying with us through this story. Thank you for caring about the people in it. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of connection, of reunion, of families finding each other against impossible odds, subscribe to our channel. Click that bell notification so you never miss when we upload. Because we believe these stories matter. We believe they remind us of what it means to be human. We believe they matter to you